the late summer and fall of 2001, something quite remarkable happened on the Glendale River. Over 1 million pink salmon returned to spawn. They came rolling in black waves, filling the man-made spawning channels, and then pouring out and filling the rest of the river. It was like a black highway of fish, stretching from the saltwater estuary at the river's mouth up to the lake at the river's headwaters. These fish were feeding this valley and all of the plants, animals, and insects living in it. The adult bears were able to put on hundreds of pounds of fat to feed them and their cubs during their long winter sleep. 2002 was forecast by the DFO to be bringing an even larger run to the Glendale, perhaps over 1.5 million fish. The bears, eagles, and tour guides waited patiently for the runs to come in, knowing that it would again fill the river with nutrients from the sea. As the season wore on, however, only a few fish had returned. The guides thought that this was perhaps because it had been a very hot summer and the river level was extremely low. Then the life-giving rains came, but the fish never returned. The grizzlies began to panic, and some moved tirelessly up and down the river, searching for scraps of fish. An old scrap of fish skin that a bear normally wouldn't even look at suddenly became worth risking a battle for. This thin female with her scared cub searched the weir in vain for salmon. The cub clung to its mother, perhaps because it had seen its sibling killed by one of the big males who can become cannibalistic if there isn't enough food. The DFO, expecting over 5 million fish coming into the area, held a seine opening. The whole fleet caught just 12 fish. No one could say what had happened to the salmon runs. Then independent biologist Alexandra Morton spoke at a press conference where she informed the public that her research indicated that almost all of the millions of juvenile salmon which formed this run had been eaten alive by fish farm sea lice before they could even make it out to sea.
It's a biologist's very worst nightmare to witness the unraveling and collapse of the place that they went to study. In a nutshell, what's happening is young salmon are migrating past the fish farms, and the lice that are coming off of the fish farms are killing these young salmon. For the past 2 years, I've examined 150 miles of this coastline from Prince Rupert to this area, which is just above Johnson Straits. I've examined pink salmon this size. They're about 1 month old, 2,000 of them over these areas. And to put it simply, where there are fish farms, the fish are loaded with lice to the point they cannot survive. Where there are no fish farms, up in Prince Rupert, there are no sea lice on the young fish. This exact scenario has played out in Ireland and Scotland and Norway, and has caused the collapse of wild salmonid populations there. Sea lice do occur naturally on this coast. They're found on adult salmon frequently. But the fish farms have dangerously tampered with their biology. Sea lice normally die out over the winter. They can't tolerate fresh water. So when the adult fish go into the streams, the sea lice die. There's none to infect the little fish that come out. Now the lice have a place to overwinter on the fish farms. There's up to 1 million fish in most of these farms, and every 3 to 4 weeks, the population of lice is going to double. So by the time the spring comes out, there's literally clouds of billions of lice larvae. You can see here that there's 30 farm sites in my area, most of them with active farms on them. When the fish swim out, say, from anywhere of the Knights Inlet rivers, they come down through here, and the tides force them to come up through Tribune Channel, and there they go out through Fife Sound, and they pass 8 fish farms. My next door neighbor out here in Echo Bay is the DFO patrolman, whose responsibility is to count the returning salmon every year, and his name is Glenn Niger. And when he reported that the salmon rivers were empty of pink salmon, I began to call patrolmen up and down the coast because I wanted to find out how widespread this problem was. So what you've got in the gray is the brood year. That's the parents of the fish we expected back this year. And the black is what actually returned this year. So Bella Coola River came out 1.2 million in 2000, 1.4 million in 2002. The Quatna, again, it's not as big a river, but they got more back than went out. In the Quay, it's equal. They had 100,000 go out, they got 100,000 back. Now you go into the Broughton, where there's salmon farms, and you can barely read on this the number of fish that returned. This is a 1.2 million salmon run in 2000, and only 16,000 came back in 2002.
There's Scott Rogers, Brendan Connors, Marty Krakosik. Counting lice on hundreds and hundreds of fish, 50 sites throughout the Broughton. Their highest count has been 78 lice on a fish approximately 4.5 centimeters long. This is a school of fish, Tribune Channel. Lice are clearly visible on some of them. You can see that one hanging down below the dorsal fin. Black spots, calamus 4 scars. There's the school, and here's a few dying ones here. Another one right there. These are not healthy little fish. Lots of damage, bug-eyedness. There's another very damaged fish with large, enlarged head. The head looks enlarged. I think it's actually the body that's wasting away. There's another with a wound. You can see a lot of large lice on these fish, a lot of scarring. And in fact, you can see it on all of the fish. These little guys are designed to seek higher salinity, looking for salt as part of how they make it to the open ocean. And yet these fish are turning around and going back into low salinity, nearly freshwater. This is exactly what the sea trout in Scotland and Ireland do when they meet sea lice from salmon farms. Sea lice die in fresh water, and I suspect these fish are feeling some relief from this fresh water due to reduced activity of the lice on their bodies. Maybe the lice stopped feeding. Maybe their grip is loosened. And every rivulet and stream from Quatsi Bay west in Tribune on the mainland shore has this kind of behavior going on. The date is May the 8th. I'm in the Birdwood Island group. I just beach seined these fish up, and these are the fish with not necessarily the most lice, but with the oldest lice. These black scars on this fish in the forefront, I believe, are made by the Calamus 4 stage sea louse. The reason I think this is I see a great many of this stage of louse attached in the center of those holes. Only the holes aren't black at that time, they'd be red. You can see the flesh. And quite often when you find that hole, there'll be a mobile stage louse somewhere else on the fish. These are almost all pink salmon. We're in Tribune Channel. It's May 11th, I believe, on Tuesday. These black scars are the Calamus 4 scars. These fish are definitely carrying a load of lice, and they're sitting in very fresh water. As fresh as they can find. This is a loner. This is what I'm calling a loner. I see them in my barrels. I see them out here. They're stuck on the surface. They're by themselves. They're covered with lice. They're very, very easy to catch. It's a loner. Just showing you how easy it is to catch them. Loner. Oops. Net. Caught. Today is May 12th, 2004, Tribune Channel, mainland shore. Once again, little salmon are trying to go back because they're dying in this ocean. I have never seen this before. Contrary to his biology, where he should be seeking higher salinities, this little salmon fry and his buddies trying to go into fresh water. I think this is a result of sea lice loads. I think when they get into this very fresh water, the lice lessen their activity somehow on their skin. And the fish feel immediate relief. Because this behavior is very hard to explain unless you look at Ireland and Scotland, where they found sea trout covered with lice, as these fish are, heading back into fresh water. This is not a stream that these fish can actually get up. But they're doing the best they can to get into fresh water. This is typical of fish dying with lice, the inability to get up to the surface. That's after spending, a day at the surface, but then they seem to lose ballast. There's a louse on the bottom of the bucket. And the bug-eyed, bug-eye's more characteristic in the chum, but I believe this is a pink. It's hard to tell. Their skin gets so wrecked, you'll be able to tell when we pull them out of the water, but it's hard to tell. Date is May 23rd. This is a coho smolt caught in Tribune Channel this morning. It was sitting in about 5 centimeters of water, right where a stream met the ocean, and we picked him up with a dip net. This fish is extremely emaciated. Bristling with juvenile lice and some pre-adults. That's a classic calamus 4 scar. There's the louse that probably came off of that scar. I think it has one up above the pelvic fin too, but can't really tell through here. Now these fish look fairly good, but their bellies should be much rounder. At least the ones up in Bond Sound are much rounder. And in my experience in the barrels, fish with these lice is dead within a day or so. There's a larger mobile stage louse. Oh, on both sides. Mocha! Stop. That little fella has at least 3 very visible lice. Mocha! No. There's a heavy load. In the spring of 2003, the provincial government and the federal government put their heads together and came up with a plan called the Pink Salmon Action Plan. And they followed 11 farms along a migration route of the wild juvenile pink and chum salmon. Not all the farms actually did anything. A lot of those farms were already closed down or had IHN disease die-offs, and so it was actually just 1 or 2 farms. But the effect was that the majority of Tribune Channel and the Birdwood Islands of Fife Sound had no farm salmon in it for the spring of 2003. And so our even cycle fish who'd come in the year before put their babies to sea that spring. And for the first time in my 4 years of work, the number of sea lice per fish dropped. It dropped dramatically. It dropped from an average of about 10 to an average of just about 1 sea louse per fish. And 30% had none at all. So when I saw that, I thought, we're going to have a good run back when those fish return. Well, they're returning this year. This is the even cycle again, coming back in 2004. And there's 7 times the babies returning as there was in the adults in those rivers. So the run increased by 7. It's still way down. It's about 250 to 290,000. It should be up in the millions. But the rebound of these fish was spectacular. And the reason I believe they've come back this year is because the babies went to sea without sea lice. So this is exactly what I expected. Unfortunately, while they fallowed in 2003, in the spring of 2004 they did nothing. In fact, they allowed Stolt to open up a new site called Humphrey Rock. Humphrey Rock is right at the epicenter of the problem, where Tribune Channel meets Knights Inlet. And the reason that area is such a problem is it's kind of like a long tube. The fish come down Knights Inlet, they go into Tribune Channel, and they follow that route. And they've now lined Tribune Channel with 1, 2, 3, 4 farms and a farm right at the end. So the sea lice that get on those farm fish build up numbers, and then as they release the larvae just slosh back and forth in this long tube that is Tribune Channel. There's no place else for the lice to go, and there's no place else for the salmon to go. And so these little salmon come out of Knights Inlet, come out of the Kakweekan, come out of the Otter River. They all join up in Tribune Channel, and they're now greeted by massive numbers of sea lice. By putting a new farm in that area, Humphrey Rock, the number of sea lice apparently grew, because this spring I saw more dying fish, more lice per fish than I've ever seen since I've been doing this research. They put the fish farm in at Humphrey Rock in the spring of 2003, and so those fish matured, and by the spring of 2004 there was mature fish at Humphrey Rock, Sergeant's Pass, Glacier Falls, the Birdwood Islands, and Wicklow, all the route that was followed the year before.
And so the young salmon that went to sea this year, spring of 2004, were heavily hit by lice. I was watching them die. There's entire schools of fish who were so stunned I could just get right over top of them and look down. These fish were trying to get back into fresh water because they're so poked full of holes by the lice clinging to them and eating their skin off that they couldn't keep the salt out anymore, and they're trying to get back to fresh water. This run should come back next fall, and I don't expect to see very many at all. There was periods of time I couldn't find a single fish without sea lice on it. So it's becoming very, very clear, no matter what you do, if you take the farm fish out of the farms, the sea lice numbers drop. If you go to a place that doesn't have fish farms, the sea lice levels are extremely low. I looked at almost 1,000 fish elsewhere on the coast where there was no farms. I found about 4 sea lice total. When you put the farm fish back in the farms, the sea lice levels come up. So it's my feeling that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food are confusing this issue far beyond what it needs to be. I've been able to accurately predict the return of pink salmon in the Broughton Archipelago for the last 3 years. And it's not because I'm a great scientist. It's because the sea lice issue is so simple, it's so clear. You count the number of baby fish that are infected with lice, and that's how many fish you do not get back. 98% of your run is infected, you only get back 2%. I feel that I'm going to watch this place die unless the public steps in right now. It's very clear the government doesn't have the will to control this industry. The sad thing is the industry is only a flash in the pan. They're running out of food, their market is vanishing. They're not here for the long term, and I think people have to really think, do they never want those wild salmon again? Because once they're gone, they're gone. You can move the industry around, you can bring it back, take it out, put it in tanks, you can do various things with the industry, but you can't do it with the wild salmon. They will come home to their rivers until they're extinct, and then they won't. And it's very, very simple. When you look at the coast, you just need to figure out where your very smallest salmon are. If you have a salmon that weighs less than a gram, which those little chums and those pinks are much less than a gram when they come out of the river, they cannot meet a fish farm because those fish are too small to take even a single sea louse. Research in Norway tells us that. Research in British Columbia tells us that. The facts are in. The weight of evidence is so enormous that unless the managers do something right now, we can hold them responsible for the destruction of these stocks, without a doubt.